Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is the GIS for Success workshop. Particularly today, we are doing the intro to QGIS. So let's get started. It's going to be kind of a, let's dip our toes into QGIS and GIS in general. In the chat, I am posting a document, which I please encourage you to save. You can use it to help follow along with today's workshop. It is kind of a lesson plan for how we're going to work through the elements of what we're going to go over today. Because what's going to be happening is I'm going to share my screen and turn off my video because my camera's on one screen and I'm looking at another screen and don't want you guys staring at the side of my face or have you guys to have to stare at the side of my face the entire time. Again, please feel free to post any questions into the chat. If you need me to slow down or repeat a step, just let me know. Again, I have someone who is helping me keep an eye on the chat today. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started as soon as I get my screen shared. Oh, I want the screen. All right. So hi, everyone. So first things, we are going to be using QGIS today. Oh, and let me also turn off my camera real quick. There we go. We're going to be using QGIS today. And what that means is this is a free open source non-proprietary software. So we can still do a lot of great analysis, working with different types of spatial data, all types of things that are going to be really helpful to us later on. So if you should have received an email when you registered with some pre-workshop instructions of how to download some data as well as how to download the software. If you did not do that prior to this workshop, you can just kind of follow along, but I do encourage you to go back and work through some of these steps yourselves. Additionally, I like to set up these QGIS workshops with a little bit of a scenario. I find that it kind of helps us understand a little bit more why we would do some of the things we do in QGIS. So for the purpose of this workshop, we are pretending that we are a group of a group that is dedicated to the outdoors in Florida, and we were asked to make a map that would help people identify many trails located within the Wakiawa Spring State Park. Now, I do want to preface, we will not be making the map, so we are not going to be going too much into this particular part, because right now we're going to set ourselves up to make that map in the sequel workshop, Let's Make a Map. So if you have not done so, I have included instructions, and this is the document if you guys haven't downloaded it or opened it. That is all the instructions for downloading this data. With a link to a Google Drive, and this is a Google Drive with all of our files that we have in here. So when I click on this file, you'll notice that there are multiple files in this one and all just describing Florida. Now I need you guys to download this entire file. So if you right click on Intro to QGIS and download, this will download everything at once. You will then need to unzip your file to access everything we need. So that being said, once you have your files downloaded, we're going to jump into QGIS. So here we have the QGIS interface, excuse me, as I stumble over my words. First time you open up QGIS, it's going to look pretty simple. It's going to look like this, where you don't have any recent projects. It's just going to have a lot of blank. Go ahead and click on New Empty Project, and it's basically going to open up to a big white space. Now, what we have here, I'm going to give a quick little tour of the interface. So, in this middle, this is like our file storage. So if you're someone who really likes to use kind of drop down and find your files this way, you can use that. Down here, we have our layers. So this will be where we see all of those files for the workshop will appear once we add them to our project space. This big blank space, I am calling this the map canvas, okay? So this is going to be where we actually visualize what we're doing. Up here, of course, is our toolbar. There's going to be a lot of great information up here that's very helpful. I do like to point out that down here is kind of a status bar. And so as we're moving through things, you'll kind of see like our scale might change. The coordinates that our mouse is will change. Just kind of neat to take a little peek at. Particularly up here, we're going to be using about, let's see, up to roughly where this 4 or 3 arrows and the magnifying glass cut off. These are going to be the icons that we focus on today. So what we're going to get doing is we're going to start adding in, and in this document that I've shared with you guys, I've tried to label what each one of those are to give you an idea of what they do as we work through them. So let's go ahead and let's start uploading some files to QGIS. So there are multiple ways you can get data into the program. One is to click on, I like to call them like, to me, they look like pieces of construction paper, but it is our like data source manager. So what we are adding in today, we are adding in all vector data. So we do not have to change any of this information right away. So what we're going to do is we're going to click our little 3 dots. And I want you to navigate to where you have downloaded your data and unzip those files. Perhaps you did it in your downloads. I like to suggest that anytime you are starting a new project, you create a folder where all your spatial data is going to live, and then have them appropriately organized. So for example, let me back out a little bit into my file system. So I have a file where I call it QGIS workshops. I have, as you can see, I have different files for some of my different workshops, and then files for some of the more common pieces of data that I use over multiple workshops. So we're going to go ahead and we add Florida in. Now, when we're adding this in, what we want is we want the one that's called a shape file. So we choose the Florida SHP file. Okay. It's also over here. This is called a shape file. And let's go ahead and add that in. And let me move this out of the way for a minute. What you should see is the shape of Florida pop up, right? So what this is this first piece of data that we've added is called a polygon. So a polygon is essentially the shape of something, okay? It is the usually, you know, some kind of bounded area of something. So in this case, the shape of Florida. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add in our other data. So we want Florida county lines, again, looking for that SHP. We'll add that. As you can see, what we've just added is a bunch of lines. These are all the county lines for Florida. So this is line data. And then I want our state parks. I want park trails, so SHP. I want our state park boundaries. And park trails and points of interest. So we're adding in all of these files. Points of interest, here we go. I may have added one extra layer. So as you can see, I'm calling these layers. I've added an extra layer to, I believe, than what I said to do on this. County lines, park trails, points of interest. So I do not need park boundaries, but I'll talk about that in a second. Oh, I did forget one more layer. So I got ahead of myself. Sorry, excuse me. I didn't want park boundaries, but I'm going to show you how to remove a layer in case you accidentally added something you didn't want to. Is if you right click, remove layer, ask if I want to remove it from the entry, and now that layer is gone. But I do want to add in, it is QGIS workshop, Florida County boundaries. There we go. SHP again. Excuse me. I apologize. I start adding things. So this final one that we're adding, so we're adding in Florida County boundaries. This file is drawn in a different projection system than our previous layers, okay? So what that means is in GIS, how we draw things, because what we're trying to take is a three-dimensional world and trying to project it on a two-dimensional surface, okay? So what that means is things are going to get distorted. Sometimes that's the shape, sometimes that's the area. In maps, that can affect the distance or the direction of something. And so it's just warning me, is like, hey, this is a little different, but we can, luckily they're not so far different that we can convert one to the other. So you're simply just going to click OK. And in the document, and yes, it was added. In the document that I have shared with you guys is some additional resources about projection if you want to learn a little more. We just don't have enough time to go into super detail today. Okay, so what you should notice is over here in our layers panel, we have everything that we've added. So our state parks points of interest, they're drawn in little dots. So this is depicting various features of different state parks all over the state. And so these are drawn as a dot. Our Florida counties, if you notice, it is now covered. We now no longer see the shape of Florida that's in yellow that we originally added. And then we also have all of these lines, but I have two trails. I'm going to remove that second trails. I didn't need that second trails in there. We can't see the trails that we originally drew. So a common practice in GIS is when you are doing a drawing order is to have all of your polygons on the bottom and then lines followed by points. Now, this will change depending on what you're drawing. Like if you have very small polygons, perhaps you want that above lines. It just kind of depends. In this case, we know that our counties, all this brown is going to be covering up state park trails, okay? So that is why we are putting trails above. I like to pause for a second and make sure there aren't any questions or I didn't lose anybody with going too fast. I'll pause for a second in case anyone needs to put something into the chat. I'm also going to take a sip of water. Okay, not seeing anything, we'll go ahead and we will move forward. So we have all of this information on here. We have some things drawn, but what does it all actually mean? We can't tell just by simply looking at it. So what we're going to do is we are going to start kind of exploring this data. So one of the simplest ways of doing that is to check the attribute table. So if you right click, we'll go ahead and pick State Park Trails. If you right click and go up to attribute table, oh, and it popped up on the side. A table like this should appear. So what an attribute table is essentially a table, as the name describes, of information of everything it's depicting. So each individual element of this table is going to have some amount of description. Now, how much description associated with each element depends on who created the data and what they decided to add. So in this case, what we can see here is we have site name, we have name, we have use. So what I could tell just by quickly looking at this, that site name is probably the park. Name is probably the trail. Use is like what type of use that trail is qualified or certified to use for. I don't know if certified is actually an appropriate classification. That's the word I want. And then over here, we even have length of the trail in both miles and feet. Okay. And then on the very edge, This is the GIS description of like how long is that particular line. So these attribute tables can be full of a lot of wealth of information. So let's do a quick, and let's look at Florida County. I want to click on Florida County lines real fast. And when we take a look at this, it doesn't tell us a whole lot of information. Like I just said, it depends on the point, depends on who made the data and kind of the point of this data. So in this case, it's just showing us the lines and when they created it. And coast band, I believe that header coast band, I believe is just some kind of classification of what that county may be. But then when we click on Florida County's attribute table, here we actually get the names of the county, we get other codings. So if you guys are at all interested in census data, Tiger name and FIPS right here, these are both classifications that are used when analyzing census data, just in case you were interested. So something I kind of want you guys to see, like how the difference of these are, and how when you are choosing data to work with, especially if it's data you are not creating, you need to check what information is there. And also keep in mind, if you are creating spatial data, you need to think about what do people, if I am not there to explain this data to someone, what do these tables need to be able to tell a person so they can appropriately analyze and use this same information. So that is essentially why I included the county lines file in this, even though we're not going to really be using it in our analysis. It's kind of a great way of learning the importance of why these tables are used. So we're going to go ahead and now jump into using some functions of GIS. So QGIS is a very powerful tool and it can do a lot of things. So we're going to just kind of start exploring what some of those things are. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to actually count the points of our parks of interest. Okay, there are a lot of points in here. Now, if I went into our attribute table of state parks points of interest, I could scroll all the way down, and I know we have over 4,877 different points of interest. Okay. Now, if I went in here and I tried to count each point, let me move the table out of the way for a second. If I went in here and I tried to count each point that is in each one of these counties, that's going to take a while. It's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to be kind of annoying, honestly. So what we can do is we can run a very easy tool. So if we come up here and we click Vector Analysis Tool, and we're going to use the count points and polygon. Excuse me. So now what we have is, this is essentially walking us through what we need to pick. All right. So in our polygon, I'm curious to see how many points of interest are in each county. Okay, because we know that there are over 4,000 in the entire state of Florida, just because they appeared in that attribute table, and we know that was covering the full state of Florida. But I want to know what they are by county. So we go ahead and choose county for our polygon shape. We're counting points. So if we had another layer that was points, we would change this, or we would make sure this said state parks points of interest, but we have only that one field. And down here where it says count field name. So this will create, this is essentially saying like what it is adding to, like what our table is going to tell us right there. And then let's go ahead and click run. All right. So it ran, we can exit out of this, and it added another shape file to our to our layers. Let's go ahead and, if you notice in this side in our layer, it just says count. That's not really descriptive. It's not going to, you know, if we save this, we come back to it next week, we may forget what count is. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click and go to properties. and go to information, or I'm sorry, source, my apologies, source, layer name, and let's call it Parks by County. Okay, and then apply. Okay. Now that is a more descriptive name, we will know what that means later. So let's go ahead and we can open up our attribute table. And this far column over here, number of points. So what that tool that we just run, count points and polygons, is it took the Florida counties layer and it added a column called num points, and it kept all of the other data. So we have a ton of information, and now we know how many points of interest are in each county. Okay, so it's kind of a neat way of quickly categorizing things without us having to do it manually and checking everything. So let's find out some additional information. I'm sorry, I'm going to take another sip of water. Hopefully that'll help my words come out a little smoother. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to run an expression. So I want you to click, it looks like a little post-it note with the Greek symbol. I believe that's sigma, but I may be wrong. I'm having trouble with my Greek letters right now. So it should open up a windows like this. So it's a select by expression. So let's go ahead and let's find all the counties that have less than 5 points. Okay. Just because we could look it up manually through that table, but we could do it faster, and then we can also change the number if we wanted very easily. So in this middle pane, these are different expressions that we could use. So as you look, you can see different types of equations that you can build, different functions, different expressions. We're going to start with an easy one. So what I want is our fields and values. Okay, so this is the fields and values for our attribute table. And we're going to click num points, double click, and it should appear on the left-hand side window. And then we just use our math equation. So we want the less than sign and 5. And sorry, I'm just double checking. Okay, yes. Oh, select features. Apologies. Make sure you click the select features down here at the bottom. Now in our table, everything that is highlighted is a county that has less than 5 features. And if I move our table out of the way, our map, all those counties are now highlighted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move our counties down here below so we can see those dots on our map again. Now we know we can kind of see how those dots are lining up with this with our expression. Now, something I want to point out is, look here, it looks like these two counties, those look like they should maybe have more than 5 points of, or they should be highlighted with less than 5 points of interest, because you can really only see 2 dots. However, if we use either the our mouse to scroll in, or we can use the magnifying glass and click into that area and zoom in, what you will see, sorry, I'm zooming in on this specific spot. Okay, what you will see is there are actually multiple points of interest in this small area, but when we are zoomed out to the entire state, they only look like 1 dot. So that's something to keep in mind, is if we tried to count those points just visually at that level of zoomed in, zoomed out, however you want to phrase it, we would have miscounted that county because it appeared to be different. So if we want, now I'm going to show you a trick for coming back out. Switch to the hand again. Okay, the hand, we can use it to move our map. And then I want you to right click Parks by County and then zoom to layer. And that will zoom us back out. So if you had a layer that was, you know, maybe just one of these counties and you click zoom to layer, it would zoom to that county. Zoom, in this case, it zoomed us back out to the entire state. All right. I'll again pause for a second. I'm not seeing any questions, but just remember, guys, you're always welcome to post those in there. Now what we're going to do is we are going to join two tables. So as I was talking about, different layers, our layers over here of information can have similar elements to it. And perhaps we want them to be able to talk to each other a little bit better. So we can make them relate. So what I'm going to do is we are going to open up our state parks points of interest attribute table. Here we go. Okay. And let's open up our park trails table. Ah, there we go. And let me pull our other table up really fast and kind of get them somewhat side by side so you can kind of see them together. Here we go. So what I want to point out is we have some different information. So we have POI names. So this is kind of like a classification of the points of interest, like what does it do? Where is it? Over here we have site name. This would be like the state park it's in. Okay. In our trails table, we have a site name, which is also state parks. So what we know is both of these site name are both labeling parks. So we could associate this data together. All right. Yes. Oh, and something I like to point out is if I double click the top of this header, it will start alphabetizing our table. There we go. And so then if I click it again, it will do it in descending order. So starting, you know, with the bottom of the alphabet. And then if I click on this one, so we have a few different ones, but I can see that Addison is in both of these tables. So they do share some common points of interest. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to exit out of my tables for a minute. And we're going to right click our points of interest. Yes, yes. And we're going to open up our properties. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come down to joins and we're going to start creating an expression. So we're going to click the little green plus icon right here. So join layer, what layer do we want it to be associated with? We want it to be associated with park trails. What field? We know that they share site name in both of these. Now, in this case, site name happens to, in both tables, be the name of the park. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes the different tables will have different head or different column names. So in that case, we could pretend for a minute that our our target field, which is our points of interest layer, say perhaps point class was the name of the park, but we know its site name, is what we want. Okay, so now we're going to join our field. So we're going to check mark the join fields box. And now we can choose what elements do we want to have shared across across points. Oh, apologize, guys. I'm stepping back 1 second. And of course, apologies. I got ahead of I didn't get ahead of myself. I wasn't double checking my notes. And we're joining different fields. Sorry, we're not joining them based off the park names. We are joining them based on the fact that points of interest and trails. So points of interest, this one does have some of the trails in here. Okay, so like biking trail, okay, hiking trail. Essentially, we're trying to add in additional information from the hiking or the trails table into our points of interest table. I apologize. I was getting us a little off topic. So what we would be doing is associating the POI name, okay, because that is what has our trail name, and name over here, because that is the name of the trail. So that's what we're joining. We're not joining them based off the park name. I apologize for that. That is my fault for getting too far ahead of myself. So points of interest, back to our properties. We're going to create our join. We are joining park trails. Our join field is going to be name. Target field is POI name. Join fields. Let's go ahead. We'll add use. So what is that trail used for? Surface, what type of surface it's made out of, how accessible it is, and then let's also do the length in both feet and miles. Click OK. Now it created our little equation. We click apply. I can OK it again to close out of it. Now, when I open up our points of interest layer, what you can see here is now it's telling me, okay, this is the table that you just had, or that we joined, and does it have the information? So what we need to do is, if I click here and find trail, sorry, I have to scroll down a little bit, biking trail right here. So this bridges trail shared this common was shared across both tables, and now we can see this additional information from the other table. Okay, so that's how we're joining that information together.
Excuse me, Kelly.
Yes.
So if we're doing this, joining these tables, and I realize I did something wrong, can I undo this?
Yes, you can. So if you wanted to do that, you just go back to that properties join menu, and you can click on it to edit it, double click on it to edit, or you can always like click on it and then use the little minus sign to delete it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, so our highlighted sections here, I'm going to show you guys how to de-highlight those. So you can do it a couple different ways, but one of the easiest ways is to just click the two construction papers with the little red deselect symbol, and then those highlights will go away. I forgot to point that out after we actually made them highlighted. So that's a way of removing that highlights. Okay, now let's go ahead and run a slightly more complex expression. So we're going to go to our park trails table, our attribute table. And let me center this a little bit. And again, we're clicking our expression creator. And for our fields and values, what we're going to do is we are going to find trails that are made of water or are over 2 miles long. Don't know why we would need those exact two features, but that's what we're going to find right now. So we're going to do surface and an equal sign. Now we can type this part out because we looked at the attribute table. I know that water is an option here. Okay, so now if you were ever unsure, what you simply just need to do is come back to your trails and check out what types of surface. Here's my surface. Surface, here we go, like natural, water, and you just want to match the capitalization. So if it was in all caps, you would type it in all caps, all lowercase, all lowercase. And also make sure you put a parenthesis around water. And then we're going to add in a capital or, because we're saying we're find surface or, and then we're going to choose, let's find length. Okay, if I double click on length, and then our more than symbol and 2. Okay, select features and move this expression out of the way. And so automatically I'm not seeing any highlighted, but if I come up here to, sorry, come up here, right here, move selection to top, it has like a little arrow. It's going to move all of those highlighted features. So all the features that meet our criteria, it's going to move them to the top. Okay. So now we can see what all of those trails that meet our requirements are. So these are all trails that are either made of water or are over 2 miles long. Okay. So even though that this trail, this specific trail is under 2 miles, it's still made of water. So it still meets our criteria. Does that make sense? If I went into our expression, moving this back, and maybe I change this to and select features, move this. Now what you're going to see is now these are all trails that are made of water and are over 2 miles long. So the expression builder really gives us a lot of power to kind of play with and be like, what analysis might you want to do? What might you want to kind of play with to figure out? As you become more comfortable, and especially if you by chance have any coding experience. Now, if you don't have coding experience, you can still totally do this. Okay, that's why they have this middle window. It kind of helps walk you through it. But if you do have any coding experience, you can just type out these functions because you probably know them pretty well. So something I think that is fun. It's a great way of kind of playing with this information and getting used to it. All right. Taking a beat for a second. How are we doing? Is everyone kind of following along? I'm going to take that silence as a yes. Okay. So what we just did is we kind of just got into the basics of playing around with all of our feature or playing around with some of the data, playing around with a few of the things that we can do. These are going to be some of the similar things that we will do in the next one, but a little more advanced. Okay. But to set us up for next week's workshop, again, making maps, what we need to do is we need to be able to change the symbology of maps. And this is also where I think people have the most fun because this is how you can make like custom maps and make them really cool. So we're going to play with the symbology. So when we loaded our data into QGIS, it just gave us some automatic colors. They're not the most fun colors. So let's go ahead and we'll play with how to change some of these. So what I'm going to do is I am going to turn off Parks by County layer. Okay, so how I turn that layer off without removing it is I just check mark it right there in our layers property. So now we can see counties underneath it again. I'm going to right click on Florida counties. I'm just, again, there's no reason I had to turn off Parks by County. I'm just doing it to show you guys, you know, some tricks you can do. So right click on Florida counties and we're going to go to properties. This time we're going to go to symbology. And what's great about QGIS is they have some like, you know, pre-made symbologies that you can use, but we can also kind of play with our own. So let's go ahead and we're going to leave it as simple fill. Right. Sorry, I'm double checking my notes to see what I wanted you guys to do. Okay, so we're going to change, double click on simple fill or click on where it says simple fill and click on symbol layer type, and we use our drop down, and we're going to use outline, right? I just wanted outline simple line. Yes, we're going to choose outline simple line. Okay, so basically what that does is it makes the inside of our box transparent. If I click apply, the reason it's yellow is because I have Florida underneath. So if I uncheck mark, oh, I got that noise because I need to close out of that. If I uncheck mark Florida, it is now clear under there. If I turn off county lines, now it's black lines. Those county lines were in like a pink color, so that's why it looked pink. So that's one thing. I will always mention that it is good practice that the background colors be simple, but perhaps you don't want them to be white. So if we go into properties and our simple line, if we change it to simple fill, but we change our fill color to maybe like a light gray. Choose a light gray. Okay, apply. Okay, there we go. Now we have kind of a lighter gray in our depicting our county areas. We can go ahead and have a little fun with our points of interest, because we know our points of interest are depicting a lot of different types. So we're going to go ahead and go to our, again, properties and our symbology. This time, I want you to go to where it says single symbol and use a drop down, and we're going to use categorized. Now, where it says value, we're going to do point class. And then go ahead and leave it set to random. If you want to change it to one of the other spectrums, you can, but random works for what we're doing right now. And then come down here and click classify. Now what we have is we have all of the different types of points of interest. If I click apply, and let me move this out of the way, all those points just got really colorful. It's kind of fun. But when I expand that out, oh, again, I forgot to close out of it because I just moved it out of my way. If I expand this down, that's a lot of categories. And if you notice, some of these categories are pretty similar, like all of these different types of camping, all of their different types of hiking. Perhaps we want there to be less categories so we can group these categories together. So if we come back to our symbology menu, here we go, we can start grouping some of these. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to group the boats together. So if I click on boat, and then I'm using Windows, so it's control. If you are using a Mac, I can't remember, whatever it is that allows you to click multiple things. I'm having a brain moment right now where I can't remember. So I have all of those highlighted that I want, and then I right click, merge categories. Okay, so it just merged all of those into one. Now over here where it says legend, if you double click, and I'm just going to change that to boating, and then if I click apply, and let me click OK so I can expand this out, now all of those boatings appear as one color right there. So we could go in there and we could do this for a bunch of them. So like all of the campings could be the same, and so on. But let's pretend that, oh, boating, I wanted to keep ramps separate. Simply you click on it again, right click again, and we unmerge categories. And yes, okay, we unmerge and then we get our categories back. All right. That is really a simple way of kind of playing with it and getting used to some of the different things that we may want to kind of play with. Again, QGIS is a very powerful tool. It is something that's can be used in so many different disciplines. And it's something that is also just kind of neat to know and understand how maps are made. It makes the world seem a little more understandable.